A Chinese oil company gets kicked off the New York Stock Exchange, but raises $4 billion in China. Why are its Chinese competitors funding it? Cities across China endure lockdown-induced food shortages. Videos emerge, giving a glimpse into what locals are dealing with. Why is China sticking to its zero COVID-19 policy, even though it's hurting the economy and its people? A China expert breaks down the political reason behind the move. We examine the differences between China's underground churches and those sanctioned by the Chinese state. And for those watching our full episode, a new move from Beijing is alarming world powers. We break down why China's deal with an island nation in the Pacific is making America and its allies nervous. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A Chinese oil giant is debuting in Shanghai after recently being kicked off the U.S. Stock Exchange. The oil giant's IPO went pretty well, though, likely with considerable help from the Chinese Communist Party. NTD's Don Ma has the details.
Chinese state-owned oil giant CNOOC raised over $4 billion in its Shanghai Stock Exchange debut. It's one of this year's biggest stock sales. CNOOC's shares surged a whopping 44% Thursday. $4 billion, no doubt, is a lot of money for a debut. But here's the interesting thing. Nearly half of those shares were purchased by Chinese state-owned companies. Political scientist and economist Ethan Yang says this is likely a Chinese state directive.
This is just the CCP telling its basically the CEOs of state-owned enterprises to start propping up the stock market by purchasing stock.
So in simplest terms, the success of the debut is mostly thanks to the Chinese state, and the purpose is to strengthen the Chinese stock market.
So Xi Jinping has actually announced explicitly that he wants to rejuvenate and restabilize the Chinese stock market. And these state-owned enterprises are performing that function in the sense that they are pumping liquidity, pumping money into the Chinese stock market.
But is government intervention in the stock market a good idea? Is this sustainable in the long run?
I think it's actually extremely unsustainable because you are getting that short-term boost, you are getting that short-term stability, and I think that's what the CCP needs right now, is that they want to prevent a stock market crash and prevent a recession, which would be absolutely disastrous. But in the long term, they're basically just supporting companies that might not deserve to actually get that money, because they're only getting that money because the CCP is telling other companies to invest it into them.
The $4 billion that CNOOC raised is the country's 11th biggest public stock offering. CNOOC's Hong Kong-listed shares rose as much as 4% in early trading, but later swung to a loss of roughly 3%. Don Ma, NTD News.
CNOOC is on the U.S. government's trade blacklist because of its connection to China's military. Public speeches given by the company's leaders also indicate it's deeply involved in Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. That project aims to expand the communist regime's influence across the world through infrastructure development. More Chinese companies now have to delist under U.S. law. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission on Friday added another 17 Chinese companies listed in the U.S. to its provincial delisting list. American regulation requires all companies listed in the U.S. to open their books for supervision by the Securities and Exchange Commission. But Chinese authorities haven't granted full access to Chinese companies' audit books. Beijing classifies them as part of its state secrets. For years, American regulators have accepted this claim and allowed some Chinese companies to be exempt from the rule. As a result, more than 260 Chinese companies are currently listed on the U.S. stock markets, meaning they get funding from American investors. The companies have a total market cap of $1.4 trillion. But those exceptions for Chinese companies appear to be coming to a close. Under legislation from the Trump administration in 2020, the new policy could remove Chinese companies from U.S. exchanges if American regulators aren't allowed to review their finances. The move gained strength in November last year under the current Biden administration, taking one step closer to kicking the companies off the U.S. market. Chinese authorities have been communicating with their U.S. counterparts on the issue. Right now, the next Chinese company primed to quit the U.S. stock market might be ride-hailing giant Didi. The company announced plans to delist last Saturday and said it would hold a meeting next month. That way, shareholders can vote on whether it should voluntarily delist from the New York Stock Exchange. On Thursday, a U.S. citizen was sentenced to death in China. Shadid Abdul Mateen worked as an instructor in a local college. He was accused of murdering a 21-year-old woman, his former girlfriend. According to police, after the pair's breakup, the defendant arranged to meet and talk with a woman surnamed Chen. During the meet, the defendant stabbed the woman with a folding knife. An official with the U.S. State Department said the agency is monitoring the matter, but would not comment further due to privacy considerations. Shanghai has been making headlines over its lockdown-induced food shortages, but the problem of lacking supplies isn't limited to that city alone. Residents in Northeastern China claim that their situation is even worse, given a lack of attention and media coverage from the outside world. Jilin province went under lockdown in mid-March, although some cities there say they've met China's zero cases goal. In some neighborhoods, antivirus restrictions haven't been lifted. Because of it, some residents say they are struggling to find food. A clip from Changchun City came out Wednesday. It captures a young girl crying for food, while her mother calls building officials to ask for help.
It's almost 1 a.m., still no food delivery. I'm starving to death. I want to eat. I want to eat.
The girl's mother again called her community's administration, but got no answer. So she sent a voice message instead, also asking for food.
We haven't eaten since this afternoon. My daughter is so hungry, she's crying. I know the food arrived downstairs already at 8 p.m. You neither answered my phone call nor replied to me on WeChat. What's going on? Are you driving us to starve to death in peacetime?
Another similar clip was posted to Twitter Wednesday. In it, another person is spotted looking for food.
I really don't have any food. I'm always eating instant noodles.
But that's not all. A migrant worker was reportedly blocked from returning to his hometown under the rigid lockdown policy. And what's more, he couldn't find a job locally either to support himself through the pandemic. In this clip, he's seen knocking on a restaurant door to beg for food.
Please give me some food. If you don't have food, please give me a little money. I have not eaten 4 meals. I don't have a penny, and I can't find a job.
The restaurant was ordered to close under lockdown, but the owner still had some food supplies left. He gave the man some pancakes and money. The man was so moved he kneeled to thank the owner. Elsewhere, in another city in northeastern China called Songyuan, truck drivers also faced issues, with many blocked from exiting the highway. One driver was said to have stayed in a service area for about 20 days. The man who shot this video said the driver was forced to isolate inside the truck with little food and drink, and later died there at the end of March. No local media reported on the case, and no information about the reason of his death is available. China's zero COVID-19 policy is the reason why Shanghai is currently under strict lockdown. This has severely impacted the economy. Factories and businesses are closed, consumers are confined to their homes, while shipping ports and supply chains are disrupted. But the Chinese Communist Party insists calling coexisting with the virus wrongful thinking. Don Ma with NTD Business News talks to a China affairs analyst to get to the bottom of why Beijing is sticking to the policy.
The head of China's National Health Commission said, quote, consolidate the hard-won pandemic prevention results and take practical action to welcome the 20th Party Congress. The interesting thing about this statement was that he associated the zero COVID policy with an important upcoming CCP meeting. The 20th Party Congress is the meeting at which Xi Jinping will seek a third term. About a decade ago, Xi Jinping became the president of China and the head of the Communist Party. The outcome of the so-called election is not dependent on the votes of citizens, but rather the result of political struggle within the party. So why is this zero-COVID policy associated with this meeting? Could this policy be motivated by politics rather than the well-being of the Chinese people? I talked with an experienced China expert for some answers. He says whether the zero-COVID policy is successful directly impacts whether Xi Jinping will get a third term.
He regards successful pandemic prevention through the zero-COVID strategy as one of the three major political achievements. He won't allow another strategy to take the zero-COVID strategy's place. If that happened, it would be equivalent to Xi Jinping announcing that he has made a serious mistake in pandemic prevention. This would become a major obstacle for him to getting a third term.
The lockdowns as a result of the zero-COVID policy have impacted China's economy. Factories are shut down, retail sales declined in March compared to last year. People are confined to their homes, they can't buy groceries, they're starving. Some have even taken their own lives because the lockdown is too much for them to bear. Why is Xi Jinping sticking to the zero-COVID policy when it's hurting the Chinese economy and the Chinese people? Tang says Xi will disregard any cost as long as he can maintain power.
CCP officials have always had this kind of thinking. The CCP will try to achieve its political goals or maintain its power at any cost. Because if it loses its power, it could never get it back. If the economy is ruined, they can always try to slowly recover it in the future. Even if people's lives and health are impacted, it's not important.
Tang thinks China will stick to the zero-COVID policy at least until the CCP's 20th Party Congress is over, which is in November this year. Don Ma, NTD News.
Next, we'd like to take a moment for an update on another situation requested by some of our viewers. They asked about the current Christian situation in China, especially given the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP's, persecution of religious believers in the country today. But before we begin, let's hear from a Beijing-based priest appointed by the CCP in an interview with the BBC.
If Jesus were alive today, do you think he would have been comfortable with a Communist Party government in China?
Absolutely. I think so.
The comment appears to hint at a grim picture of religious freedom in China. For decades, China's ruling communist regime has always repressed religion, and Christianity is one of its main targets. Officially atheist, the party runs its own churches and appoints its own priests, like the Beijing-based priest we saw in the clip. As a result, churches in China that didn't get approval became underground churches. Some of them actually refused registration themselves, out of concern that they'll be too closely monitored by the regime to properly convey the Bible. Their concerns seem to be justified for a number of reasons. According to Bitter Winter magazine, which reports on religious freedom and human rights, in the past few years, thousands of crosses have been torn down from the roofs of religious buildings across China. That's so people can't find the churches, according to what a local official told the magazine. In other cases, many churches have not only been closed, but completely torn down. A report found in one Chinese city alone, more than 60 churches were demolished or received a demolition notice within a year. What's more, even state-sanctioned churches now face new restrictions. In China, all churches must demonstrate their loyalty to the CCP, like displaying portraits of Communist leader Xi Jinping on their walls with party propaganda banners alongside them, instead of religious images. Surveillance cameras are also installed inside, recording all who attend services. Officials also forbid churches from advertising or publicly trying to attract new believers. More drastically, on top of jailing priests and prominent Christian leaders in China, Radio Free Asia reported last year that authorities in China are detaining Christians, quote, in secretive mobile transformation facilities to make them renounce their faith. That's despite China's constitution guaranteeing freedom of religion. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program on YouTube. That's after being demonetized for a year. Full episodes can be watched on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up for a 14-day free trial, please click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer, and see you tomorrow.
Every once in a while, something comes along so masterful, it leaves you in awe. So inspiring, it changes your life. So beautiful, you wish it would never end. When that happens, it's something not to be missed. Shen Yun, an all-new production every year.
The performance was enchanting.
I feel better about the world. I feel uplifted.
It touches you. It really does.
The expertise of the dancers was really, really strong.
To know that it was live music was really fantastic.
We didn't want to miss this.
Make sure you see it.
Have to come. Life-changing.